Mike Smith here. This is the sign-up form on my website, and while I was designing what happens when someone fills out this form, I thought about all of the ways this could be handled and also what would be the ideal outcomes for this. So I came up with a list of requirements, which I'm showing here, the objectives for the sign-up form. I want the sign-up form to create a user account. I want the user to be auto-logged in so that they don't necessarily have to check their emails, go to a link, select a password. All those extra steps are barriers. And the purpose of this sign-up form is to be a lead magnet. In other words, any barriers are going to detract from the purpose of this sign-up form. I want the process to be as smooth as possible. So going back to the requirements, account creation, auto login, and then redirect to a useful page are all immediate. I want all those to happen straight away. If an existing user happens across this form and fills it out, I want the form to be able to manage that without throwing an error message. If I decide that this form was to have extra fields such as a comment or a question, then I want the process to be able to handle that and store that extra information as metadata against the user. And finally, I want the welcome sequence, what happens after this form, to be flexible. So I don't want to just rely on the standard email notifications that Wordpress sends out, for example. And also want it to be GDPR compliant so that I can use this website for world markets. And I did mention redirect there before, and of course that redirect has to happen after all the automated steps have completed. So for example, if some things happen such as the user account creation or membership or an enrollment in a course as part of this flexibility, then I need to make sure that the redirection to the useful page is after all that's completed. There's no point sending someone to a course, for example, if they haven't yet been enrolled, if that enrollment takes a little bit longer. So I thought, well, let's go through the different options for how we can get this to work. And hopefully this will be useful for you as well. I mentioned I want everything to be as fast and as smooth and painless as possible so that I can capture as many leads with this magnet as possible. So let's have a look at the tools that I've got. I've got LearnDash LMS because I am going to be selling some courses. I've got Groundhogg CRM, which is email marketing and can do some automation with funnels. I've got Fluent Forms Pro, and I've got Uncanny Automator and WooCommerce. I've also got WP Funnels, but I'm not using it in this particular case because it would actually introduce more steps rather than fewer steps. So these are the tools, and I'm going to be talking mainly about Fluent Forms, about Groundhogg, which is the CRM, and Automator, Uncanny Automator, and the fact that I do mention the LMS because courses are one of my possible products. Okay, so let's have a look at an overview then of the different options that we can put into place. And so I've created a bit of a flow diagram here with 4 alternate paths. Let's go through them one by one. Right, as you can see, I've usefully put some red boxes here which indicate less than ideal characteristics of these first 3 pathways, and it's pretty obvious that it turns out that this 4th pathway is going to satisfy all of our objectives. But let's go through the first 3 first. Okay, so the first option is mainly using the form plugin. For example, Fluent Forms Pro can obviously log entries, all form plugins can do that. It can also create a user, it can log that user in, and it can redirect that user to a useful page, a URL, has that capability. And of course it can also do notifications to both the user and the admin. But there are some problems which I will point out in just a moment. Here we are in the Fluent Forms editor for that sign up form, and as you can see, the form itself is pretty simple. Let's have a look at the there are no entries at the moment because this is a new website. Let's have a look at the settings and integrations. Okay, so as you can see down the left hand side here, we've got quite sophisticated, comprehensive capabilities. We've got confirmation settings here. We could redivert to a custom URL at this point if we wanted to, once the form is submitted. We can require a user to be logged in, but that's not useful for us because it may be that it's a new user. In fact, it's most likely to be a new user, a new visitor, not yet having an account set up for them. Looking at the email notifications, Fluent Forms allows you to add as many notifications as you want, and I've got one here set up to go to the admin and also to the user. And obviously I can tailor these, so I've got short codes available here so that I can pull data from the form and tailor it a little bit, make it a bit personalized. So that's okay, that works all right. And as I mentioned, we can send a notification to the admin. Oh, if we wanted to, we could send it to anybody. Also, it has the ability to register a new user. So I think that's a pro feature. Having a look at registering the new user. So we can define a role. We can't choose more than one role, just one role. We can add user metadata here if we want to. We can allow the user to log in automatically. We can enable or disable the default WordPress welcome email, so we could actually sort of suppress that if we wanted to by deselecting that, and thereby the notification that goes out to the user, which we have tailored for them, is the only one that goes out. I'm just going to leave that enabled again. And do not submit the form if the user already exists in the database, which sounds good, but in fact is one of the problems. So what's the problem here? Well, let's go back to our user requirements. Okay, user account creation, yep. Auto login, yep, can do that. Redirect, yes, it can do that. Pre-existing accounts. What's probably going to happen here is that if the system detects a pre-existing email address, the user will be redirected to another page to log in. In other words, they won't actually submit this form, and so our process will abort. So that's a major problem. Can add extra metadata? Yes, that's possible. The welcome sequence is flexible to an extent. GDPR compliant? Probably not. And this is the kicker here. Redirect to a useful page after the automated steps, not before. So let's have a look at the process for this first pathway here. Okay, so the entries are logged, the user is created. It probably aborts for an existing user. If not, then the user is auto logged in, so that's good. User is redirected to a useful page. You see, that happens too soon, and the reason it happens too soon is because the enrollment process needs to be manual. The form can't talk to the learning management system and affect an enrollment. So that requires the website owner to look at the entries here and then process them manually. So what that means is that this unknown time here means that the user is redirected to the course page or the My Account page or the membership welcome page too early. that's not useful. And that's why this first pathway is not ideal, doesn't satisfy our requirements. Let's have a look at the second pathway then. So this is where the functions are mainly handled by the CRM, which is Groundhogg in my case. Some action is by the form plugin, of course, the actual form itself, and the form plugin will log the entries as it always does, but then the CRM takes over. So the user is created. Does it handle the existing user? Well, let's have a look. So this is the new sign up welcome funnel in Groundhogg. If you're not familiar with Groundhogg, it is capable of reacting to certain triggers. These triggers are shown in blue, and then taking actions, and these actions are shown in green. And as you can see, we can add as many of these steps as we like. So certainly this satisfies the requirement for flexibility. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But one of the triggers here is this particular Fluent form, which is the sign up form. All right, so you can select which form, and then you can map the fields. So we're going to capture all this information. And if we had extra fields, we could capture those as well. So that's going to be useful. And then we can create a user, and as you can see here, it can handle if the user already exists. It's not going to throw an error. And also we can add more than one role. So if the user already has a role, then that will be added in addition to existing roles. That improves our flexibility later on. For the new user, it's going to use the email address as the username, which is actually a really good idea. We can enable or disable the WordPress notification as we could with the form. And as you can see, there's actually additional logic here that's available as well. And then for flexibility, well, the CRM is eminently flexible. We can apply further tags. For example, we can take care of that 10% discount, which is one of the features of this form, of this lead magnet. And we can send a confirmation email, and we can wait a day, and we can send another confirmation email. So it's actually, as you can see, designed like a marketing funnel, where you contact the person, and then a little bit later you contact the person again. That's going to increase the conversion rate. Conversion rates are terminology normally used for sales, but it can also apply to lead magnets, which is what this is. Okay, once that email is confirmed, then the rest of these steps happen. We take note of the fact that the user is confirmed, so that we can then interact with them further, and that achieves GDPR compliance. And then we can go and send them a welcome email, and we can do lots of other things as well. This CRM can do lots of things. It can send emails. It can send emails to admin as well, apply and remove tags, delay timers, change enrollments. So there's an integration with LearnDash here. We can in fact enroll the student in a course if we want to. Can't enroll the student in a group, but we can in a course. All right, what else can we do? We can apply an owner, which is marketing speak for a group leader or a supervisor, someone who looks after a group of people. We can edit the meta, so we can add the data to their user meta fields if we want. We can do webhooks, which means we can connect with external services. Lots of things we can do. The CRM is actually pretty flexible. Let's just get rid of that. Okay, so that ticks a lot of boxes, but does it tick all the boxes? Let's check. As you will probably appreciate with that very speedy introduction into what a CRM can actually do, I do recommend when building a website that you at least consider adding a CRM to it. But in this particular case, you can see some red boxes here. So because the CRM is primarily email based, it can't auto log in a user, for example, and it can't redirect them to a web page. You can add links to the emails that you send, and those email links can be auto login links, but we can't avoid the instance where the user has to go and check their email. So it's a delay in the system, and that may be acceptable in many cases, but in the case of a sign-up form like this, it's too many steps. So that does not satisfy our requirement for this redirect, auto login and redirect, and being immediate. So that means that our second pathway is not going to do the job for us. So now let's have a look at the third pathway, and I guess you can see the red boxes here, the unknown time here. We have a similar problem. Let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. So this is where we try and transfer some of the functions from the CRM back to the form plugin. So for example, the entries are logged, that's normal. The welcome sequence is triggered because the CRM knows about the form, so that's okay. But we leave it to the form to create the user, which is going to have that problem before for existing users, throwing an error message. It will be able to auto log in that user, and it will be able to redirect them to the, in this case, the course welcome page. However, we still have this problem with an unknown time, because the CRM operates on a chronometer sequence, and it's difficult to predict how long this sequence is going to take. It might be faster than the form logic, but unlikely. I think the form logic is going to be more or less instantaneous, and the CRM is going to step through all of these steps. Maybe a half a second to process each one of them, but the problem is if we put an enrollment step in here somewhere, even if we put it right up at the top here, we can't guarantee that enrollment is going to happen before the user is redirected to that course welcome page or membership welcome page or wherever. So that is the main issue here. Let's look at the final pathway then. Of course, I've left the best till last in this presentation, and so what we're going to do here is look at the form again being used, but primarily just to log the entry. So we're not going to use any of the other capabilities of the form. Incidentally, that means you might be able to get away with a free version of the form. You might not need the pro version of the form, so that's good. And then we also leave it to the CRM to do what it does best, which is the email based stuff. So for example, as I mentioned before, sending a confirmation email, waiting a day, sending another confirmation email, and then a welcome email, which is the process generally that is required to satisfy GDPR. And of course the CRM can do other things as well, but we are going to leave it to the Automator installed in WordPress to do the other things. The Automator is going to create the user. The Automator can handle existing users, and I'll show you that in a tick. It can certainly log them in, it can add CRM tags, so the Automator is aware of the CRM, so it can add tags which then the CRM can use as triggers for other actions. The Automator can also take care of enrollment and add extra meta, and then once all of these things are done can direct the user to the useful page. So let's just have a look at the Automator that I use, and I'll spend a bit of time on this because out of all of these plugins, I suppose the form plugin is the most familiar to website designers. Perhaps they're familiar with the CRM, but they've probably used a cloud-based CRM like MailChimp or Constant Contact, or perhaps even some of the more expensive ones. But not many website designers are yet familiar with automation plugins. So let's have a look at that. So this is a recipe within the Uncanny Automator, and there are 2 or 3 alternatives to Uncanny. There's WP Automator. I think there's another one as well, and there are even cloud-based automation services, but effectively they work similar ways. There's some kind of trigger, and then there's some kind of actions. The key with Uncanny Automator is that it is particularly suited to working with LearnDash, and also working with Fluent Forms. The teams working on those have very close connections. Okay, so what we can do is we can trigger based on a particular form, and that's the form that's been selected here, the sign up form. That's the trigger, and then a new user will be created here, and that new user draws information from the form: the first name, the last name, the email address. The username is also going to be the email address, which, as I said before, is actually a really good idea. The display name, look, see, we've got a lot of control here. We've got the display name, which we can set. That is going to make the user experience just a little bit nicer. And then we can also manage the password. The Automator is much better at managing the password than the CRM, for example. We can allocate a role here. So I've chosen the subscriber role. Only one role able to be selected here. We can log the new user in, and if the user already exists, it will select an existing user using the email field as the identifier, the key identifier. So there's not going to throw an error message there. So that takes care of that, and then we can allow the Automator to help the CRM by adding tags so that the CRM can then do what it needs to do, and then redirect when all triggers are completed. See, all triggers are completed, then redirect to, and I've just chosen the My Account page there, and that's because I've got WooCommerce here, and also I've modified the My Account page to also display LearnDash courses. So that's a very useful page. But you could, for example, if this form was tailored to a particular course, then you could redirect the person to that course page. So for example, I'll show you this. LearnDash integration. I can add the user, let's see, so I can enroll the user in a course, select the course, and I've got a free course here. This is a 60-second answers course, so that I could actually just give them that as a bonus. And I might modify my form here, sign up for 10% discount plus free access to the 60-second video series plus free subscriber content, which is going to make my lead magnet a little bit more magnety. Yep. So that's possible, and we can also add metadata. We can add a new role. So in fact, we can get around the fact that there's a only one role here, so we can add more roles, and that might be useful to help the CRM do its job. It might also be useful if you have conditional content displayed based on roles. So that would be useful for a membership function or for controlling visibility of pages or content within pages specific to a particular role. That's really flexible. What else can we do? Yeah, user metadata. This is what I was thinking about here. I think we should be able to add. Yes, update the user's details. Yes. So, oh yes, there it is. Set user metadata. Okay, and what was the other thing that I wanted to show here? We can change the user's role as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of functions here that the Automator, I've got the Pro version, that the Automator can do that neither the CRM could do and the Form plugin couldn't do. In fact, the Automator is probably one of the most useful plugins that you can add to any WordPress website. Because of what it can do within WordPress, but also because of how many other services that it can create, connect to. I haven't got all of these active here, but for example, you could connect to Google Sheets, you could connect to Facebook pages, and Zoom. There are so many possibilities here. Okay, so I might just clean this up again. And as you can see, this recipe is live, so that's going to work straight away. Also, the thing about Uncanny Actions is that they do work immediately, unless you add a particular specified delay, which is very flexible as well. Right, so we can do the CRM tags, we can do the enrollment, we can do the extra meta, and then we can redirect the user to the useful page. So pathway 4 here, primarily using an Automator plugin, is going to satisfy our requirements best. And I hope that's been useful for you. It's certainly was useful for me to lay these pathways out so that they weren't just in my head. I could see them visually, and then I could see what the problem actually was. And that also allows me to, as a developer, allows me to explain to existing website owners and also other developers why this pathway is better at achieving these objectives than these other pathways. So thanks very much for watching and listening.